Hi, I'm Luisa, food influencer at LuisaInsta, and today I'm in Brodie's kitchen. I'll be showing you how to make my Butterbean Brownies today. Now, I love making these brownies for two reasons. The first reason is you can make them in a blender, which is great because that's all you have to wash up at the end. Second reason is, because of the butter beans that go into the brownies, there is no need to use flour in this recipe, and it only uses a very, very small amount of fat, which is a tablespoon of butter. So essentially, these are guilt-free. So let me show you how to make them. The ingredients you'll need to make these brownies are 1 can of drained butter beans. This is around 1 cup, and you can use different types of beans if you don't have butter beans at home, such as black beans, kidney beans, or even chickpeas. 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of butter, salted or unsalted makes no difference. Half a cup of dark cocoa powder. Now this is not the same as hot chocolate powder, so please don't get them confused. 3/4 of a cup of white sugar or caster sugar, 1 teaspoon of ground coffee beans or instant coffee, half a teaspoon each of baking powder and baking soda, 1 teaspoon of balsamic vinegar, and 1 bar of good quality chocolate. I'm using a 150-gram bar of milk chocolate today, but you can substitute it for dark chocolate, white chocolate, or even a candy bar like a Snickers or a Mars. You probably want to use 2 or 3 of those if you're not using an actual chocolate bar. The truth is, the more chocolate you want to find in a brownie, the more chocolate you should put in it. So just go with your taste. So we'll start off by blending the beans because they'll need the longest in the blender. So the beans just go in and you blend them for about 1 to 2 minutes until you have a very smooth paste. You might actually need to stop halfway through and push the beans to the bottom of the blender using a spatula, just to make sure they're really nice and smooth before giving them another go. Then push the beans back down into the blender like you did before adding the rest of the ingredients to the recipe, in any order. So we're adding everything except for the chocolate bar. That goes in last and that is not blended. So I'll start off by putting in my egg, my butter, my cocoa powder, my sugar, my coffee. And the coffee actually doesn't make them taste like coffee at all. It just gives the chocolate an extra added layer of depth. And then my rising agents, so the baking powder and baking soda go in. And I'll just measure my teaspoon of balsamic vinegar. And then we just blend again for about 5 minutes. So I've turned my blender off and I'm going to check on my brownie batter, which is really nice and smooth and silky and chocolatey and everything brownie batter should be. I know it's going to be very tempting to eat this while it's raw, but try not to because it does have an egg that is uncooked in it. So that looks delicious. I will leave that for a minute while I chop up my chocolate. You can technically use chocolate chips, which will save you this part of the recipe making, but I like to have really nice thick chunks in my brownies, so I'm going to chop my chocolate myself. So in a chocolate bar that's already broken up into pieces, you kind of want to follow the guidelines for the pieces, roughly. And then you want to cut them in half one way and then cut them in half the other way. I'm probably going to break this down into 2 halves just to make my life easier. So essentially you're breaking up each chocolate square into quarters. Again, very roughly. This is not an integral part of the recipe. I'm now going to put about half of the chocolate into my blender with the brownie mixture, and I'm not going to blend it. I am just going to stir it in. It would be easier to do this in a bowl, but then that's another thing you've got to clean up at the end. So I recommend just doing it in the blender and taking an extra minute. Once that's done, your brownie batter is actually ready to go in the baking tin. I'm using this sort of size of baking tin. It doesn't really matter too much. This is probably about 22 centimeters in length. You can use square, you can use round. It really doesn't matter. They'll come out just the same. So I've just prepared this with a little bit of oil, any oil, it doesn't matter. And then I've cut some baking paper to shape, just so the brownies don't stick to the tin, which will make my life easier when we go and take them out of the oven. You want to really try and get as much out of the blender as possible. It's a shame to leave it in there. So do take your time with this. Once you've got it all out, spread it nice and evenly into your baking tin. Now, it's going to be a very thin layer, but that's absolutely fine because with the baking powder and the baking soda we've used, it's going to rise quite a bit in the oven to a nice and thick brownie. I'm now going to top this with the other half of the chocolate bar. So like I said, candy bars work actually very well in this. And you can even mix chocolates. You can have a triple chocolate brownie using milk, dark and white. That's always gorgeous. Try and spread your chocolate nice and evenly, just because no one wants the corner bit with no chocolate on it. I know that's usually my part. So that's what your brownie should look like, and it will now go into the oven at 180 degrees Celsius for about 30 minutes. So it's been 30 minutes. Let me check on my brownies. There, they look done, but let me just test them out with a toothpick to see if the center is cooked through. That looks quite clean to me. You do want a little bit on there just to make sure the brownies are very nice and moist inside. But if you do have a lot of brownie batter sticking to your toothpick, then they're underdone, and you just pop them back into the oven for about 5 minutes and check them again. And keep doing that until you get this kind of a little bit of a stain on a toothpick, but no more than that. So these are nice and done. The toothpick came out dry, and we've left them to cool for about 15 minutes, just because they'll be easier to cut that way. So I am just going to lift them out of the baking tin, trying not to break them, so do it nice and gently. And then just lift down the baking paper, like so. And I'm just going to cut these into brownies. So nice and sizable, probably about this size. Again, you don't need to be very precise. So I probably didn't let these cool down enough, because as you can see, they have broken up a little bit as they're still quite soft. So if you are able to be a little bit more patient than I was, do wait a full 30 minutes for them to cool down. But the way these look, it's really difficult to wait before wanting to tuck into them. So you'll be excused if they are a little bit soft and broken. And there we go. These are our Blender Butterbean Brownies. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Luisa, food influencer at LuisaInsta. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, please check us out on Patreon. You can have lots of bonus goodies on there as well. See you next time.